welcome. And for those of you who don't know, my name's Craig Robinson. I work for the Milwaukee Bucks. I used to be a college basketball coach, a high school basketball coach. I worked in corporate America for a while before I got into coaching. And all of that has brought me here today to talk to you about culture. But before I start on the whole culture thing, and I've got some notes here, I want to thank Freddie and Carmen for inviting me to come out and talk to you guys. This really brings back some memories, because I remember the days of sitting right there and trying to get as much knowledge as I can. And I always hated the last guy because the last guy kept talking and talking and talking, and I'm trying to get to have a beer or something to eat or something. So I feel your pain, so I'm going to try and impart a little bit of wisdom in a short period of time. But what I want to say is, feel free. I want you to feel free to ask questions. I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. And there's probably not a question that I haven't heard, but if I haven't heard it, I will be sure to let you know, because it's hard when you stand up in front of people and you hear a question that you haven't heard. I want to make sure that you're recognized for that. So, but Freddie and Carmen, Freddie and I worked together at Oregon State, and I'm going to digress for a minute on that 1-3-1. It was so much fun watching you midnight guys play. And by the way, are all you guys going to be all right for playing tonight? No. Hey, so now there are two teams who've held Klay Thompson to 1 for 12. One was the Cavs, the other Oregon State when we played him. He used to hate playing against this 1-3-1. Could not get a shot off. So that guy who was the guy who was making the shot over here in the corner, made 2 in a row here. That's it. If you were playing against Holy Cross's 1-3-1, forget it. Forget it. So, but let me start by, culture is one of those things that everybody talks about, including us when we were working together as a coach, as an organization in corporate America. And rarely do you get opportunities to build your own culture. Because what happens is, especially in coaching, you get moved into these positions and there's a culture that's already there. And it's so much harder to break down a culture and then build it back up, because usually from a college standpoint, you don't have enough time. From a high school standpoint, you have so many other things going on, and it makes it really hard. So again, when Freddie asked me to do this was a great exercise, because we had to kind of rebuild some cultures together. And the first thing I always thought about was, what's the definition of culture? And the sort of textbook definition is it's a set of values, attitudes, goals, practices that characterize an organization or institution. That's sort of the textbook definition. But what do you need to do to change or implement culture? Everybody all right back there? And there are 3 key components that I think are really important. And mind you, I've taken these from corporate America. I've taken them from coaches I've met. I've taken some from my parents, because you never think about your family as being a culture. That's a culture that you've known, that you've grown up in, that you really probably don't talk about as culture. But the 3 key components that I think are that you have to take into consideration when you want to make a change in culture and you want to build a winning culture is the first thing is the organizational structure. And for coaches, that structure is kind of set up for you already. The structure of the institution that you work for, the structure of a team, you usually have a head coach, a couple or 3 assistant coaches, and you have players. So that's sort of pretty set. There's not too much you can do. In corporate America, when you go into a situation, let's use the Milwaukee Bucks as an example. My role as I run our player and organizational development. So I get to look at the organization and try and change things to make it a better organization to help our culture. The second component is ourselves, right? We're the one who's setting the plan in motion. And the two things that I think you have to be when you're trying to change a culture is you have to have a great sense of leadership, right? You have to embrace leadership. You can't be afraid to stand up and tell guys what to do and how it should be done. And that can be done in different tones, but you can't be afraid to do it. The second thing when we talk about ourselves is, outside of leadership, is, and I don't think this is talked about enough, is you have to be flexible. You have to be flexible. And just as Coach Owens said when he was out here talking about the 1-3-1, and Coach Chambliss, you know, everything's okay until something doesn't go the way it goes. And then you have to be able to figure it out. And it's the same thing with your organization. It's the same thing with leadership. You want to be flexible. And then the third component is the people you surround yourself with. And as coaches, and I know all of you as coaches have done this, you talk to your players about who they have around them. And the best way to get players to have the right people around them is for you to have the right people around you. And I cannot tell you, I mean, you know, Freddie and Carmen are not only, we were coworkers, but we're dear friends, our wives are friends, our families are friends. That's the start of building a winning culture. You want to trust and respect the people who you work with. Players, you want to recruit the right players, you want to have the right families around you, and you want to have the right coworkers around you. Now, how do you do this? What are some of the things that you have to do with these components? And the first thing on my list, and I'm going to go through 3 or 4 and give you some examples of how we did it, and then hopefully open it up for some questions. But the first one and the most important one is communication, right? And coaches, myself included, we all talk a lot, right? Not all of us know how to communicate. We all talk a lot. I mean, we stand out here and we're telling guys what to do and people what to do, but you have to learn how to communicate with not only your players, the organization you work for, the refs. Communication is key. And within your teams, I think the two of the biggest things in communication is defining your players' roles. So many times we think that our players know what the point guard is supposed to do, or what the shooting guard is supposed to do, or what you're supposed to do on this play, what you're supposed to do on that play. You can't be afraid to call those guys into your office and talk to them individually on what their roles are. And, you know, people ask me all the time, what's the difference between college and pro? Outside of the fact that everybody in the NBA is good. I mean, everybody. You know, I'm going to digress for a minute. You know, when you're out recruiting in college and you're looking for good players, you know, how many college coaches do we have here who have to recruit? All right. So you got a bunch of, you're looking for good players, right? All the time. You know where they are? They're in the NBA. They're in the NBA. The worst guys in the NBA would be the best guy on most teams. And it's funny. I was one of those guys who would think every now and then, I wonder if this college team, Kentucky, could ever beat like the worst NBA team. No way. No way. All right? Trust me, no way. But I digress. And let me share with you one of the best communication techniques that my coach, who I played for in college, I played at Princeton University for Pete Carrill, legendary coach, but he motivated by character assassination. So he would call you all kinds of things and tell you how bad you were. But there was the way he did it was genius. And this is what he would do. Every day after practice, we're all, you know how you are when you're practicing, guys, you're all looking at the clock thinking, okay, it's getting to be 7:30, practice should be coming to an end. And Coach Carrill would be like, yo, everybody sit down. And we'd sit down right there, all 15 of us. And he would go down the line. That's what we call it, all the guys who played for him. He would go down the line and start with one guy and tell him mostly the things he couldn't do and did wrong, but every now and then he'd say something nice. And then he'd go to the next guy and the next player and the next player. And this would go on for hours. For hours. So we'd end practice at like 6:30 after having started at 3:30, and we wouldn't go shower until 8 o'clock because he was critiquing every guy. Now, I'm exaggerating only a little bit for effect, but what that does, and I've done this, we've done it as a staff, it does two things. One, it lets you know where you stand on that team. If you're the 15th guy, you know you're the 15th guy. If you're the number one guy, you know you're the number one guy. But more importantly, it tells the 15th guy what he has to do to be the number one guy, and how the number one guy has to keep working because number 2 through 15 are coming for him. I didn't know until I started coaching how genius that was. As old school as he was, that was the best way to communicate with our teams, because you just get rid of a whole lot of BS when everybody knows their roles and where they stand on the team. The second, the third thing, so we have know your roles, know where you stand on the team. The third thing, and now most importantly with this young group, sorry young guys, is you have to understand that you can't, like in the old days, and I see there's some coaches who are not as old as I am. I'm probably the oldest person in here, but you can't coach everybody the same anymore. I mean, I grew up in a time where everybody got the paddle, everybody got the run, and Daryl Sy, who I grew up idolizing, who played bitty basketball in Chicago, and a terrific basketball player in his own right, knows what I'm talking about, because we played for a coach who used to paddle us when we missed layups. And at that time, that was a good way for me not to learn how to not miss any layups. Because, I mean, this wasn't like a ping pong paddle. This is like a paddle ball paddle, one of those thick wooden paddles with the holes in it so the meat could just go right through. And he killed us on those, but we never missed any layups. And Daryl never missed any layups because he never took any layups. He shot all jump shots. As a kid, who does that as like a 12-year-old? He shot jump shots all the time, and they went in. They went in. But to give you an example, we're getting this influx of, I'm recruiting foreign players, right? And I'm not going to tell you where he's from because I don't want to besmirch anybody, but it's nothing negative, but I had to talk to him differently than I had to talk to everybody else. You know how when you grow up in the States and everybody teaches you how to shake hands, and you look a guy in the eye and you look at your coach when well, in some countries, that's disrespectful to look somebody in the eyes. So for the first 6 months that I coached this kid, I'm wondering why I'm not getting anything across to him. And one of my other players says, hey, coach, you know, so-and-so, he's not hearing you because he's so afraid of you because you always look him in the eye. And that's disrespectful in his country. And I'm like, can you believe that? I mean, we're living in an age with these young, and I won't just blame the millennials. It's just differences. People are exposed to more things. They have different experiences. You can't communicate the same way to the same people. The second thing I want to talk about is accountability, which is, that's on us as coaches. And just so you know, it's as hard to make guys accountable in the NBA as it is to do it for like 5-year-old kids. Actually, it's probably easier for 5- and 6-year-old kids, but that's our fault. And we had this wonderful thing at Oregon State that we came up with. First, everybody, the rules have to be the same for everybody. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. But in doing that, you're always trying to figure out how do you set the rules up so that it's easy for the guys to follow them. It gives you some latitude, you know, you cover all your bases. Well, after years of coaching, we came up with these 4 rules. Freddie, you remember the 4 rules? Be on time, be in shape. This is the best one. Stay out of trouble, because that covered everything. Just stay out of trouble, right? So that was number 3. The 4th one, which put the cherry on top, if you get in trouble, I have to be the first or the second person to know. And if I'm the second, the first has to be your parents. Now, I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything, but we were pretty happy with those 4 rules because it almost covered absolutely everything. And let me tell you what happened in the culture we had because of that. Our players were so worried about me finding out after something happened. They always came to me with their problems. Now, what you have to think about if you're gonna have an accountability profile like this is that what are you gonna do when people get in trouble? That's a whole nother thing that I won't even get into enforcement. But what we tried to do was we tried to give them some kind of reward for coming to us rather than letting us find out in the streets, as we used to say. Which brings me to the next thing is consistency. And being consistent as a coach is what we do, right? And how I like to do it was we tried to make the first 45 minutes of our practice be the same every day. Now, when I say that sounds pretty rigid, and it is, but it's so important. It was so important for us when we were changing the culture to get everybody on the same page from a mindset. And what we would do is we'd have 20 minutes of individual workouts, just like workouts like if we were Thrive 3. Every guy had something they needed to work on, and we had coaches individually work on with them for the first 20 minutes. The next 20 minutes were split up between drills for dribbling, passing, 3 men up the floor, stretching, and then we had a shooting drill that we kept track of how many shots we made every day. That no matter how much we were winning or how much we were losing, we did that same thing every day. And I think what that does is it gives your players a sense of, what's the word I want? I don't want to use consistency, but it gives them a sense of security that they know what's going to happen for the first 45 minutes of practice. And the other thing is, I mean, I'm sure you guys are dealing with now with this young group is guys always having something to say about what's going on, right? And this is what I'll tell you. So we have 4 kids, but I have 2 younger kids that are 5 and 7. And the only advice I'll give you is treat them like they're 5 and 7. Just don't let them outlast you. And that was the mindset I had to take with 18 to 22-year-olds. Don't let them outlast you. And I know that sounds like a hard thing to do, but when they're coming at you with it, you just stick to your guns because you will outlast them. Because y'all will quit arguing. Plus, these guys don't know how to last without texting you more than 5 minutes of talking to you. So do not let them outlast you. Now, this one, there's 2 more here before we get to the questions. But this one, I really like this one, and I call it empowerment. And if you can put all these things together, I think this one is going to be the hardest one to let go of, because as Freddie was saying, coaches like to control stuff. And the reason why you're doing this is because you can't control what happens out here. No matter how much we think we can't. But we can control what happens with the rest of our programs. And if you can some way help your players feel like you're empowering them. And I'm using players, but this is your staff. This is any of the people who are around your program and are going to have an influential part on your program. If you can empower them to feel like they're a part of the process, it works magic for your program. And what I mean is, I'll give you an idea. So I'm gonna tell a story here that encompasses the accountability and the empowerment. So early on in our career at Oregon State, we went down to Arizona, which is always a bad place to play because they're just good, right? But the weather's good. And where you stay is like right around Party Central. So players, young people being the guys they are, thought that they could sneak out, go hang out, and then come back and I wouldn't know anything about it, which always strikes me as odd with players, because basketball players are the most recognizable players in any sport. I mean, just think about it. You're recognizable, first because you're tall, second, the game, everybody sees your face in the games. It's one of the brilliant things about basketball is that these guys can take advantage of that kind of stuff for their brands and things like that. So I had a group of guys, including 2 of my best players, who went out. Now, how they thought that I wouldn't find out about it, I don't know. But let's jump ahead to the game. Suspended them all for the game. So I had 6 available players for the game, 2 walk-ons. One was a really good player, though. All right. I had two of my starters didn't go. 2 walk-ons and then 2 other bit players. So I sat everybody else. We were in that game with those players until they ran out of gas with about 4 minutes to go. It was a 4 to 6 point game the whole way. Now that we're at Arizona State, because they did it when we were at Arizona. And then the next game is at Arizona State. And the guys who played did a great job, but I have one walk-on who shouldn't even be a walk-on, let alone out on the court. But God knows he was playing his ass off, pardon my language, and he was just hustling and he was so tired, he was walking around, he looked like a drunken sailor. And every time something happened to him negatively, I went over to the bench and I screamed at the guys there and I said, this is your fault because he shouldn't even be in the game. And I lost my train of thought because I had that memory. But empowerment. I will tell you that Nobody cheered for those guys more than those guys on the bench. And those guys were telling the guys who were in the game things that were going on where, our coaching staff could have done the same thing, but I cannot tell you how moving it was to see those guys being accountable for what they did and helping our players. Now, one of those players became an NBA player. And one of the other guys could have been, he just didn't work as hard. But the empowerment part that I want to tell you about is that we were in a home game against Stanford, and being the coach, I thought, all right, we're down one with 16 seconds left. I know what we're going to play. I call a play, and my best player says to me, and I call it for my best player, and he says, you know what, Coach, if it's there, I'm going to take it. But I think the way Jared's playing, he should try and take his man one-on-one, and I'll wait in the corner. Now, just completely different from what I wanted. But it was the right thing. I was so caught up in the game and so caught up being relying on the guy, the term dance with the girl that brought you, or dance with the guy that brought you. You guys are too young for that, I'm sure. But my dad used to say that, always dance with the girl you brought. So I was going with him, and he felt empowered enough to say, Coach, I think we should do something different. And it's because I wouldn't yell at him about saying that. And I'll tell you where I got that from. I got that from Coach Carmody, who Freddie works for now, was one of those kind of coaches who would say, what do you guys think? And now that I've been around the NBA, that happens a lot, because these guys are really, really good players, and probably a lot of them could be as good of coaches as they are players. And just seeing the buy-in from players when you give them that empowerment. And it's the same with, you guys know how, if there's any assistant coaches, we've all been assistant coaches too, when your head coach says, hey, what do you think we should do here? It just makes you feel like a part of the process. So I've gone on too long about that, but that one's really important in building a winning culture is making the people around your program feel empowered so that they're in it as much as you are. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was reinforcement, how we reinforce our players, because again, no offense to the young guys in the back, they're not used to being negatively reinforced like they did in the old days. And I see that with NBA guys now. Their feelings get hurt. You guys are laughing. You folks are laughing, but there's nothing more alarming to a coach than seeing an NBA player's feelings hurt, because you think those guys are impervious to that kind of thing, but they're not. It's just the age. It's a different time. And it gets back to the communication. So before I open it up to questions, really what I'm trying to get across to you is that if you can there's no real roadmap, but if you can use some of these things to sort of tailor it for your own program, you'll come up with the right culture. There's two things that I think if you can incorporate some of these things in it, that will work. What will happen is you will develop trust and respect with your players and your team. And if you have that, you can go a long way. And Freddie told you about, at Oregon State, I ended up getting fired at one point, but I'm here to tell you, with not as much talent that was in the rest of the Pac-12, we had the fourth winningest coaching staff in Oregon State history. Then the three guys ahead of us are all dead. So in 25 years, we won more games than any other team there. And it was completely due to mindset and culture. So with that, let me open it up for questions. Do not hesitate to ask. We can talk about culture. We can talk about anything. I loved watching the X's and O's because I don't get to say anything at our practices. So if you want to talk X's and O's, I'm happy to. Who's first? Don't be bashful. I know you're ready for beer, huh? Go ahead.
Do you emphasize on winning?
Pardon?
Do you emphasize on winning in the culture?
Oh yeah, you know, I've been using the term winning. The question was, do you emphasize winning? I do, but when you're starting out with a team that's on the bottom, sometimes you've heard everybody talk about the process is more important than the result. So we got to a point where we talked about winning all the time, but early on we just talked about getting the day right, I always use the term being in a 12-step program. Like if you're in recovery, we got to go one day at a time. And if we do this stuff for the next 30 days, chances we give ourselves a chance to win. So you really talk more about the process, and it just gives you some leeway at the end to still have things to teach about. Yes.
So you had mentioned feelings and things like that, which I think is really, really important. But how much of your development at your level includes mental skills training? And then I guess a follow-up to that is, are you looking for players that are already mentally tough? Or
Great.
that defined it
Great question. Great question. So there was a two-part question there. We talked about feelings and at our level, do we do anything about that with our players? Number one, and two, do we look for those players ahead of time? So I'll answer the second question first. Absolutely look for players who are good enough. And then once they're good enough, then you start looking for the qualities that we find important in a player. And which are being able to be coached. And if they aren't, is there some way we can help that process? Now, we don't, to get to the first question, we don't have an in-house sports psychologist. I'm the closest thing to it by being the VP of player development.
Well, most of us are, right?
But most, you took the words right out of my mouth. In college, when I was coaching in high school, that's what you are. You are the sociologist, you're the psychologist, you're the surrogate parent, and you name it. I don't think the league does as good a job with that, but they're getting better. There are a lot of people who have psychologists on staff. We had, I don't know how many of you guys know Doc, who was with us last year. We tried that, and I think he got in a tough situation. I think we need somebody on call for these guys to talk to professionally, because at some level, a coach can't do it. Even though you are a coach and are trained, there's some things that I miss, or there's some coping strategies that I don't know that I could, that I think would help guys. Did I answer both?
Yep.
Okay, all right, good. Anybody else? Oh, in the back. Whoa, one of the youngsters. Okay.
I was, as a coach, you get a player that's real talented, but they kind of struggle with a lot of confidence. They're real good, but they kind of struggle with confidence.
Yeah.
Trusting in the skill set. What type of steps do you take to get them?
Good question. The question was, if you have a player who's really talented but not confident in his skill set, how do you get the most out of that player? You know, what I've always found, the best thing that helps confidence is confidence. And how do you get it? Is work. So and this isn't a con job either. It's not like I'm like trying to trick players, but there is a direct correlation with the amount of work that you put in, and is directly correlated with the amount of confidence you have in your game. The more you work on it, the more confident you become. Why? Because the more you work on it, the better you get. But I will tell you this. The one thing you don't have to worry about in the NBA is confidence. Them dudes all think they should be on the All-Star team. Every single one of them. Yes?
You talked about consistency earlier.
Yes.
So I just want to know, how did your team buy into those practices being 45 minutes the same every day? How was the buy-in from that?
The buy-in was good, and I didn't give you the precursor to doing the 45 minutes. Was when I first got there, we practiced at 6 in the morning. So how I got the buy-in was, you guys improve, we practice later each day. So we went from 6 to 10 to 12 to like afternoon practice. So that was one way. The other way, though, is if your players know that you are working as hard as they are, you care about their success, and you give them that sort of down the line feeling so that they know what they need to do to get to the next thing, or the next, to maybe, hey, how can I move from 15 to 10? They will buy in. They will buy in. They're kids. They're used to doing what people tell them to do. But you have to outlast them. Like, because, you can't just, like, if it's not working, like if you set a goal for, all right, 30 days and it's not quite 30, you just got to stick with it. And that's the hardest part, because we run out of time as coaches. Yeah, there was a hand up back there. Yes?
How do you determine team goals on a maybe yearly basis? And what are some that maybe were pretty common year in, year out for you?
Yeah, so the question was, how do I set team goals year in and year out? I wanted to have realistic goals that would help move the needle each year. But it always depended on what sort of raw materials you had, what players you had, where they were in their stages. So it was a Rubik's Cube every year. It was a Rubik's Cube every year. Because, if you've got a program that's already set up, you just say, okay, we want to win the championship. But sometimes that's not realistic. So we tried to set achievable goals and then have some sort of far-reaching objectives that if we could get to, that didn't necessarily correlate with wins and losses. And it was a conundrum. Like, so the process we went through is that we evaluated each player, we evaluated our season, we evaluated our schedule, and then tried to come up with, the games we thought we were going to win, the games we thought we had a shot at winning. We always said that we wanted to just split our away games. I'm just throwing some things out here that I'm thinking back to. When we're on the road, we want to split our away games. If we won the first one, it was easy to get amped up to win the second one. So we always had a different goal of, if you won your first away game, you had to win the second game. And we throw something out there. We win that second game, we're going to take a day off next week. It was really tailored for each season and each group of players.
Did you have the team have input?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for reminding me of that, because I left out one part about the empowerment part. I always thought that the guys had to get to a point where they gave themselves over and would let themselves be not only coached, but graded. Like, you got to be able to take getting graded. So watching film and getting an F. And what we tried to do is have guys know what we were going to say about them and be able to grade the next guy and be graded by them. So we really worked on empowering the players to be a part of the process. You really have to do the Jedi mind trick when you're in the Pac-12 and you're getting you go to LA, you get the 12th best guy instead of the first best guy. So you're always going to be behind the 8 ball. So you have to find ways of motivating them. Yeah.
When you talk about empowering players, you talk about a few things to get them to buy in and empower them. What are some specific ways you empower them? And then in turn, how do you kind of create a sense of like ownership?
Good question. So that first 40 minutes of practice. Now this will get back to what we were talking about. So after we got rolling and we knew at the first part of the 40-minute practice, I would allow guys to say, what do you want to work on in your individual workout? Usually they would say because I'm also telling them what they should be working on at the end of practice. So then the next day they come back, and if we're doing this right, they have the answer to the test, but they just don't know they're getting it, right? It sounds kind of conniving, but it really isn't. It really isn't. It really isn't. It's communication. That was one thing we used to do. Then, at the end of practice, we started doing, so we did these 4-minute games. We play 4-minute games instead of playing, like some guys just scrimmage, but we played 4-minute games because it allowed us to work on some of the, out of bounds play situations, different situations that you'd have at the end of a game. And before, I would we'd scrimmage for 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever the time was, right? It got to the point where these guys were so bamboozled that we would, instead of scrimmaging for 20 minutes, we'd play best of 5 or best of 7 4-minute games. So you're talking about scrimmaging way more than they would have if we were just scrimmaging for 20 minutes. Now that's a little conniving, but that's what they wanted to do. So you set them up for things that they like and enjoy, and you think about it differently. Well, how can I use this to my benefit? And it works for both sets of folks. That answer it? Okay, cool. Yeah, you had one?
Yeah, what have you done in the past to get guys to buy into one another?
So that is much more what I'm doing now with in the pros, but it's the same thing, right? When I was the end of my college coaching career, they started doing you could have team meals at your house once a week, or once a month. Once a week, I sound like Duke, jeez. Once a month, right? So each time I would do one, those guys would have to decide where we were going to go. Like it could be at my house, it could be at a restaurant. And then they had to come up with a discussion topic. They had to come up with one, I would come up with one. And then that's how we would talk. And it would get, and then we all took our phones and put them on the side. Can't have your phones with you. That's one thing I left out. I just remembered that. And if you can believe this, I got NBA guys to do that. But that was, I think they were scared of me when I first started working there. So they did it. I don't know if I can continue to get them to do it. But that was when we would just do things together that were non-basketball. And when we were on road trips where we had an extra day, we would do some kind of team bonding outing.
You saw that translate on the floor?
Absolutely. I saw it translate on the floor. If the guys are doing it right. And you have to be paying attention though, because if there's any kind of clickdom going on that you don't know about, it'll undermine your process. Yeah, Sharif.
I seen it both ways. You seem like a really prepared guy. But me and Freddie got a chance to play for Coach Ryan, but he never, late game situation, never drew anything on the board. How are you in that situation?
So it's funny, Freddie will tell you, I think the board is only good in certain situations, right? So, and it's only because I grew up with a guy who never drew on the board, right? So, but there are times when you want to make adjustments to a play that you know you've run 6 times that you have to show them what the adjustment is. So I would say 85-90% of the time, we just ran a part of something we were doing that I verbalized. And I'll tell you why because I thought about maybe I need to draw up some things because it gets back to how guys learn and how to communicate. What I didn't realize, and now check this out. So I didn't get into coaching the normal way. Like I think I told you guys, I played and I had a good playing career, played professionally a little bit, and then I went right to work in corporate America. And then I got a job as an assistant coach with Bill Carmody at Northwestern. And I was like your typical player. I thought, oh man, this coaching stuff, this is gonna be easy. I thought it was just like having practice, like you just yell at people, right? Until I went to a Division I practice and I saw all of the things that go into practice, which is the same for all of you guys now, because everybody is going to clinics and they're having their practices be way more professional. So I was like, oh my God, I'll never be able to do this. But here's what I learned. When I was in college, Coach Carrill, I would play the wing and the post. But I always, at practice, was on the baseline listening to Coach play or talk. I started coaching, had to stand up there. You know how difficult it is to look that way and coach when you have learned to play this way? Maybe not for you guys. It was like a different language. And when I realized that, I realized some guys are looking at the game differently. Like there are some guys who can't look at drawings and know how to do it. They're spatial and experiential. They have to have, not only do they need 5 guys, they need 10 guys so they can picture what the defense does. So I just started teaching everybody spatially for that reason, so that at the end of a game, I can call a play and in their mind, they can picture what it's gonna look like. So it might be for different reasons that Coach Ryan did it, but that's why I did it. And by the way, that is a question I've never been asked. That is a question I've never been asked. Yeah.
What do you think is the most important thing for like high schoolers to know?
I think the most important thing for high schoolers to do is, from a technical standpoint, learn how to shoot. Learn how to shoot, number 1. Learn how to dribble, number 2. I know footwork's important, but I'll share with you another story. How are we doing on time, Freddie? We all right? Okay, so after all this playing and coaching, I started playing in these national 3-on-3 tournaments, right? Won a lot of them. One of the assistant coaches I worked with at Northwestern played against me in college. I went to Princeton, he went to Columbia, right? So all the Princeton guys would get together and play in these 3-on-3s like 1 weekend a month, and we're traveling, we're sponsored, the whole shebang. So I come back on Monday, he said, how you do? Well, we won. It's like, man, a month later, come back. How'd you guys do? Yeah, we won. The next time, how'd you guys do? Lost in the finals. Next one, how'd you do? We won. And he said to me, he's like, you know what? I haven't won anything since I was in 6th grade. Now, I say that to say most basketball players are not gonna play in college, right? Most high school basketball players are not gonna play. So you want them to get involved and teach them something that's going to help them be successful now. Because a lot of times we try and teach them stuff, or they try and teach themselves stuff that they see pros doing, and it just doesn't work because they aren't pros. So for high schoolers, I would say teach them how to dribble, teach them how to shoot so they can have fun while they're out here playing. In college, you got to teach them how to dribble, teach them how to shoot, because the pros are so good that they don't. Where's the Thrive 3 guy who I met? Oh, right there. We were just talking about this standing over here, and so I've got a corroborating witness. He's working out NBA guys, and they can't do stuff that his middle schoolers can do. And if they could, they would be all-stars. And now with the way the game is going, you have to be able to shoot. Like when we do our draft stuff now, if a guy can't shoot, he is not getting a Craig Robinson vote. Like when we're going around and we're voting, if he can't shoot, my hand is behind my back. I don't care how athletic he is. You have to be able to make shots. How we doing? Good? Well, listen, you guys have been terrific. This is great. We're going to go over to do the social thing. So I'll be over there. If you have any other questions or you want to ask stuff that you didn't want to ask in the big group, feel free. Thanks for your time. Thanks for participating.